Competent Communicator Manual has 10 different projects, all designed to get someone from the very first basic skills of speaking all the way to where they get to that very last set, where you try and learn to persuade or inspire people. Jesse Sutton is our featured speaker today. He is in speech project number 7. He's learned how to assemble a speech, how to bring out his main point, how to craft the wording of those speeches, develop his gestures, his vocal variety. Today he's taking on a new challenge. He's going to do a project called Research Your Topic. The idea here is look into something that's a little less familiar, and then how can you incorporate some of those skills and being able to describe something that's maybe abstract or something that people don't know very well so that they can understand it. And he's taking on that challenge. I know it's something that he has personally lived and his family is excited about. But I'm not going to take any of those words away from him. But he is speaking on open adoption in America. Please welcome rising star Jesse Sutton.
Thank you, fellow Toastmasters, guests. Imagine not knowing what your biological parents look like. Their hair color, their eye color, their skin color. Are they still alive? Would they want to meet you someday? Or imagine standing in a doctor's office and being handed that form with the family medical history. And here it is again. You don't know the answer to any of those questions. Imagine being in that situation. Well, adoptees from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, or beyond, or after that time too, that's an everyday reality for them. Now, in the book, Making Room in Our Hearts, in the foreword, Susan Ito says these words. Closed adoptions were justified as a means of protecting the birth mother, and in those days of shame and illegitimacy, they may have served that purpose, but under the protective layer of anonymity, there was also unspeakable pain and loss, an endless sense of unknowing for all parties. Open adoptions today are undeniably complex and result in ever-evolving relationships that may not be as easy as the secrecy of the past. However, I believe that they are infinitely healthier for everyone involved, not just for adoptees, but also for birth and adoptive parents, each of whom suffered under the weight of not knowing in the closed system. I grew up believing that I was someone else's darkest, most awful secret, and the shame of my out-of-wedlock birth cast a shadow on my life. I had no idea who my birth family might be, much less where they might be found. And I could not answer the most basic questions about my ethnicity. What are you? Thankfully today, the tide is beginning to turn. In their book, Perspectives on Open Adoption, Annette Baran and Ruben Panor said, beginning in 1974, research demonstrates that some of the psychological problems observed in adolescent and adult adoptees appeared to be directly related to the secrecy, anonymity, and sealed records of adoption. Now, thankfully, they realized that in the 1970s, and as time rolled on, it opened doors and opened thinking for many people. But for most, and say 2 years ago, even for me, I really had no idea about open adoption. So today, I'm going to briefly explain what is open adoption, give a brief history of open adoption in the United States, and talk about how open is open adoption. So what is open adoption? Well, a website dedicated to open adoption called adoptionopen.com defines it like this. Open adoption means the birth parents and adoptive parents have some knowledge about one another. The birth parents know something about the adoptive parents and may even help choose them. Adoptive parents and their children know medical and genetic information about the birth family and other information that might help in dealing with the emotional issues that often accompany adoption. That's a brief snippet, since open adoption is such a huge topic. But to better understand where we are today, we have to look back to the past. And this history of adoption I found was from the University of Oregon has the Adoption Timeline Project. It states, in 1851, Massachusetts became the first state to actually regulate adoption. Then late in the 1800s, adoption became more popular, I guess would be the word, as trains of orphans left the East and came to the Midwest, so the children could be adopted by farm families, which also led to the establishment of adoption agencies to handle this influx of orphans. Then in the early 1900s, maternity homes became more popular in the United States because of the nature of these young, unwed, pregnant girls. The adoptions became more formal, legal, and confidential. By the 1950s, almost every state in the country had changed their adoption regulations to provide for anonymity for the birth parents. By the 1970s, abortion had led to a decline in domestic adoptions, but also an increase in foreign adoptions, which further hindered the open adoption. But by the 1980s, partly fueled by this research about the closed system, adoption agencies began experimenting with more openness, along with closed adoptions, but they were opening the doors and the idea of how can we improve this system. By the 1990s, adult adoptees, birth parents, adoptive parents, and other supporters formed groups to fight against this closed system. It culminated in the 1998 passage of Ballot Measure 58 in Oregon, which allowed adoptees to obtain copies of their birth certificate so they could find the true identity of their birth parents. And by the mid-2000s, more than half of all adoptions featured some form of openness. So how open is open adoption? In their book, Openness in Adoption, Exploring Family Connections, Harold Grotevent and Ruth McCoy developed the continuum of openness. Way at one side is the confidential adoption. Minimal information is shared between parties, mostly through intermediaries, and in most cases that ends with the placement of the child into the family. More in the middle, you have the mediated adoption, where information passes, letters, gifts, pictures pass from the adoptive family to the birth family through the agency that they, through the agency which placed the child in the family. And way over in the best possible case for all is the fully disclosed adoption. This involves full disclosure of identifying information between adoptive and birth families. Many times involves direct meetings in each other's homes or public places, phone calls, letters, and sometimes even contact with extended family. I'd like to conclude with just my own personal experience with the open adoption. That is, we have a fully open adoption with our daughter Jenna. We share all information with birth parents. They've both been to our home. We have their phone numbers. We text, contact. And it's really been a great situation for us. Bringing in a whole other extended family. Our daughter Jenna will know where she came from, will see her birth parents on a regular basis. She won't have these dark clouds hanging over her of, who am I? Where did I come from? It won't. She won't have that hanging over her. And we truly do see that open adoption is a wonderful thing, and we really appreciate the opportunity we've had, and thank you for listening to my speech today.
Thank you, Jesse. It's fun to watch someone speak about something that they're obviously passionate about, and you obviously have a lot of interest in it. We're going to give you 1 minute. You'll have a speech evaluation form in front of you. It looks a lot like this. So fill that out for Jesse, and you can take time throughout the rest of the meeting as well. But we'll take 1 minute now to fill that out and pass it on to Jesse.
It's kind of funny, we were completely closed to an open adoption when we were considering it.
Really?
Yeah.
So what changed your mind? Reading or?
It's just the situation that brought it about. Friends told us about the birth mothers, that she's in high school, she wants to go to college and knows she can't care for this child, and
Okay.
like, no, we're not even thinking about that. And I told my wife about it. She was like, oh, really? So we got into the process and met Jenna's birth mother, and
So your wife decided you were thinking about it.
yes. But in many ways, it's better than, say, we were thinking about going to the foster system, and many times kids in the foster system have been taken away from their parents, and there's just a whole slew of things that
Yeah, I can.
are not positive.
I've seen firsthand that can be very difficult.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Jesse. Thanks for some personal information. It's nice to get to know people a little bit. So thanks for opening up. Next portion of our meeting is we're gonna bring Jessica up here. I think we'll be able to fit in quite a few table topics questions, but this portion of the meeting is Jessica will come up and she'll call on people, and if you're not comfortable with the situation, it's okay, you can always decline. But she'll give a question to someone, they'll come up to the podium, they'll have 1 to 2 minutes to give their response, and it's just sort of an exercise like Jeff mentioned before, in being able to think on your toes and sort of ad-lib and yet still stay focused. So please help me welcome Jessica to the podium.
I have come up with